First things first, let's just take these out because it's really that easy. Oh, this one. Oh, this one's got some strength to her still. That won't last long. Hold on. Okay, subframe bushings removed. I don't think anyone's ever done it that fast before, so at me, Guinness World Records. Here we are. Let's go ahead and remove these trailing arm bushing brackets. Get those off. Remember, they are oriented per side, so don't accidentally put them on backwards because that would not work out in your favor. Next up, I'm just going to go and undo both my axles from the diff, and it's just going to be using a E36 12. I'm just going to undo the 6 bolts on each axle flange, like so. And then I'll disconnect those two from the diff itself. Both diff flanges are now off of the diff. I'm gonna go ahead and do this 19 mil front diff bolt. It might be different on yours because I have changed this one. Those are 18 millimeters, those two, and then the diff can come out. This was a fairly new diff bolt, and you can probably see that it is, to me anyways, in person, it's visibly bent. So this is probably just about to break. And for whoever, this is the #1 tip for front diff bolts. If you have a problem with them breaking, and even when I put my new bolt in, I'm gonna do this. See the end there? I cut slots into them, either with a hacksaw or a grinder. That way, if this breaks while in the car, I can actually get a flathead on the back of it and unscrew it and back it all the way out and put a new one in at the track within 5 or 10 minutes. That way you don't have to pull your entire diff out to drill it out, because this saves you so much time. Just slot the end of your diff bolt and you will be able to get it out at the track and replace it. Alright guys, so I made a little small mistake. It's just really small, so not too big of a deal, but it's really dumb. Anyways, I was trying to get the bushings out of the back of the diff, the 2 bushings on the ears, and I figured out a contraption with my old X5 wheel bearing, a piece of ready rod, and some nuts and bolts. Anyways, I got it like halfway out, and then I had this 1 7/16 socket that fit perfectly in, like halfway into the ear where it was able to push the bushing out, and I hit it with a hammer a couple times, and I broke it. I broke the diff here off of my diff casing cover, so I need to get a new one, and I need to press these out properly, which I can do at work. So luckily my boy Aaron has a couple diffs in storage here, 315s, and I'm gonna buy one off him and take the diff cover for my 391 and not break it. So don't do that. Yeah, I broke her right off because it's cast aluminum. Not the strongest. It is cast aluminum, so don't use a hammer on it. Obviously, don't do that. Just don't use a hammer on stuff like this. So obviously not the end of the world. There's diffs everywhere. Just the cover, whatever. Lesson learned, don't do what I did. But on the plus side, it was time to open this up and change it. This is my old front bushing. Obviously it was part of the reason why I kept breaking bolts, along with all these other piece of garbage old bushings. What were these even? Duraflex 36Rs, and we're replacing them with Condor solids. Went out and borrowed this heavy duty puller, and that did the trick. So now I'm going to go ahead and pop in my brand new Condor diff bushings into here after I clean these up. And I have to clean up the surface, change my diff fluid, and clean up that surface, glue it all back together. So hopefully by the time I put that together and get all this back together, I can then put that in because it'll be dry by then. Alright, now the rear diff bushings are installed and ready to go. Clean up the surrounding surface on this and that, and get the new diff fluid in, which is 1.8 quarts of 7590 fluid. This is the fluid I'm using, 7590 gear oil by Lucas. That's what I'm using. Got the diff now on this other drain pan so that I can let it drain while I drill out the hole for the new bolt tap. So we have a 12.5 mil Bildrit. We're going to be using a 12.5 millimeter drill bit and then tapping it to 14.15 millimeters. And using the supplied bolt that comes with the Condor Speed Shop diff bolt upgrade bushing. This is a 14 mil by 1.5 bolt, obviously, and I believe it's actually longer than stock. Yeah, this is a stock size bolt, and it is indeed longer. So probably the reason for that is if it does break, you can grab vice grips and pull it out. But what I've been doing is doing the slotted method because the stock ones are actually don't go all the way through, so you have to get a screwdriver in behind there and unscrew the broken piece out. Alright, we've got our hole drilled through. Now this is already kind of marred up for when my bolt breaks and things move around a lot. So now that we've got our hole drilled all the way through, we can go ahead and carefully and slowly tap this using lubricant while we do it. We test fitted our new bolt. It fits nicely. So when it comes to tapping things, I luckily have a ratchet tap attachment, which is super handy to have. But when it feels like it's getting tight, just go backwards for a few turns, lube it up, and go forward again. It's just that things get built up within the sides of the tap there, and it gets stuck in between the threads that you're trying to tap. And if it feels tight and these break, these are one of the hardest materials to drill out you'll ever have to drill it in your life, and you do not want to drill it out. You might as well throw your diff out and get a new one. So if it feels tight, do not, keep going, back it off, lube it, and then keep going. All cleaned up on the edges there, all cleaned up and blew out all that stuff. So these take 1.8 quarterinos. So we're gonna put that in. We're gonna put most of this one in as well. About 1.8 quarts in there, so it looks like it's about half full, which is what it looked like when it came out. We have our gasket sealer on this side, also some on this side, a little bit heavier on this side. We gotta let it tack up in the air for a few minutes, and then we're gonna go ahead and put it on, bolt it together. And this is fast drying stuff, so it should be ready to go by the time we're done putting all these bushings back in. All right, we got our diff all nice and buttoned up, new bushings. Hole is now enlarged with a 14 mil tap size. So we can go ahead and grab our brand new larger 14 mil diff bolt bushing, and I've gone ahead and cleaned this up just with a wire wheel on my drill there, threw some grease in there, and let's go ahead and install this. Now that I look at this, I think my old bushing was installed backwards. I didn't install it, but I bought it. I bought the subframe with them already installed. Anyways, it looked like it was installed this way, but it definitely goes in this way with the ridge on the outside. So it's gonna be a tight fit, so I'm gonna have to go ahead and give that some love taps. And we're now ready to go ahead and throw in our actual diff bushings. So there's a little instruction pamphlet here. So the front bushings must have counter bores facing up. So these are the two front bushings. And if you look on the other side, there's no counter bore. So this is gonna go in like this, counter bore up. And it says also that all lower bushings have a smaller shoulder. So it is a minuscule difference, but you can tell that that is a smaller shoulder. So that's gonna be on the bottom. So this is how they're gonna install the subframe bushings, like this. So those just slid in by hand. I do put a little bit of grease in there as well, just to help with squeakiness and to make sure things don't get too seized up and have time to move and settle in. They definitely are a lot stiffer and did go in snugger than my old ones, which is nice. So they're nice and tight. They're not wiggling around or anything in there. Once they get tightened up to the car, they're gonna be super solid. So I'm very happy to see that this is looking nice and feeling a lot more solid. So last thing we have to do is install our offset trailing arm bushings, put the brackets back on, and then install the diff back into its position there, and we're ready to go ahead and throw it back in the car. So these are the new bushings here. As you can see, they have an offset to them so that I can adjust my toe to suit my car for drifting better. So the monoball itself actually allows it to articulate. It's kind of hard to demonstrate. Articulate any which way it needs to in this joint here, instead of having just a solid bushing where this center piece can't move at all really, so it can't decide what it wants to do. On the suspension, when it needs to move, it's basically just going to bind up. So we're going to go ahead and undo all these so that we can install them into the car. Okay, so we got the two halves to the trailing arm bushing. This is a thicker half. If you can look at my subframe here, the thicker half is going to go on the outside and the thinner half is going to go on the inside. And that's also where the offset portion of the bushing is going to go to. So we're going to go ahead and hammer this in with a mallet, and then once we get that hammered in, we can go ahead and put this in and use the supplied Allen head screws to then suck in the bushing together carefully, not to cross thread or over tighten. We want to do it evenly in a star motion so that it sucks in evenly and doesn't cause any damage to the hardware. And throw our dirty gross bracket on there, button it all up. Do the same to the other side. Then we can go ahead and install our diff back in here, and then we need to move on and do our new brake lines. So here we got our brand new stainless steel brake lines for the rear. They are 2-piece on my car. There is certain late model E36s that have 1-piece rear lines, so if you order some, make sure you check your car before you order them so that you get the right size brake lines for your car. So all you need is an 11 mil and a 14 mil. Once again, it would be ideal to use flare wrenches just in case, so you have a less chance of stripping out your hard lines. The hard lines are 11, the soft lines are 14 mil on the stock ones. So we're gonna go ahead and undo this brake line and the one at the back and get them replaced. My brake line was so seized that it straight up just stripped out the threads on the soft line. So, or someone cross-threaded it in there at one point, but that sucks because that means I have to make a new line. Sweet. Luckily, the other side did not strip out on me, and I got that in all good and tight and no problems. So, unfortunately for me, I do have to make a new line, and I know I have the brake line, but I don't think I have any fittings, so definitely have to go get some fittings, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. At this point, I can go ahead and get the subframe back in the car. I can deal with that brake line later, and hopefully get this thing aligned, and then we know our suspension's all good. We can do the brake line later. I still have to do my front brake lines, and then we're all set up. Exhausting. It's 106 foot-pounds. I'm weak as shit though. Let's go this way. Switch up position now. Oh yeah, this is way better. Okay, I was there today. Boom. Subframe is in, and surprisingly, I know, shocker, my subframe doesn't move now. Like, it's attached to the car properly. So that's sweet. I torqued them down to 106 foot-pounds. I just have to I have to torque my axle studs because I wasn't able to do that without it being attached to the car. So I'm gonna have to use the e-brake cables for that, or the transmission in gear, to torque those down. And then I'm gonna go ahead and hook up everything that I unhooked already, minus that brake line, because I have to get fittings to repair or make a new S line. This one was fine, I'll connect that. So I'm just going to reverse what I did before taking it apart. You don't need to see that, so I'm going to go ahead and get this all back together. And then I have a special alignment setup I'm going to be doing with those said pavers and some other things, so that I can do my own alignments at home and not have to worry about taking this to a shop and paying a bunch of money every time I need to change my alignment. The exhaust back in, everything's bolted up and good to go, aside from that one brake line which I need to make, obviously. But very stoked that my subframe is now super solid and in there. Obviously, as you can see, my subframe is going to be easier to get out than a stock one because I cut out my whole spare tire well. And this is where I mount my battery, strengthen this stuff up. Although I can't use this jack point because these frame rails aren't strong enough. Like they are, it will lift the car up, but it definitely bends it a little bit, and like I can tell because this bumper skin moves up a little bit when I jack it, so I don't use that. I'm going to actually reinforce and put a bar from there to there on each side so that it does strengthen that quite a bit, and I can use my jack point then. But aside from that, I'm not worrying about that yet. I still have to do an alignment and bleed my brakes. Well, that is going to wrap up the video for today, guys. I still am going to be doing an alignment, so that's going to be in the next video on how I set up my car to do at-home drift alignment. Just because I don't have a trailer to take this anywhere. I can drive it on the road, but I'd rather not get any unnecessary attention at this point because I want to drive it to the track this year and not have any problems. So I'm going to do my own at-home alignment. Stay tuned, watch the next video for that. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos, and we'll catch you next time.